Moderator, Cristina Arroyave.
Resolución de con
Resolution of controversies in advertising matters by private agencies in Latin America and Europe. Jordi Güell, General Treasurer and member of the Board of Directors of ECTA, Spain. Sergio Barragán, Senior VP Counsel and Health Counsel for Global Force Group, Pepsico, Mexico. Maria Jimena Cobreros, Associate Director and Associate General Counsel Latin America from Procter Gamble, Panama. Rafael Atab, Assistant Reporter General of AIPPI, Brazil. Moderator Ana Cristina Arroyave, Partner of Ideas, IPS, Costa Rica.
Muy buenas.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us today in this panel on conflict resolution with advertising companies in Latin America and Europe. As you all know, in this globalized context in the advertising world, there are many, many controversies around consumers, companies, and authorities that need an effective resolution mechanism for these types of conflicts. Also, with the changes in the global era when it comes to the advertising world and the need for quick ad campaigns, it is often difficult for courts to speed up processes. So, we will talk about these organizations that resolve these conflicts, and we will talk about self regulation and its role, and the company's point of view attempting to resolve these conflicts. We will talk about the legal framework around it. We will also talk about comparative ad services. We will talk a little bit about marketing as well, and we will also, sorry, and we will also talk about the challenges and opportunities that have come up, challenges and opportunities that have been put together with these organizations and how they behave in each of the countries. Today we have four panelists, excellent panelists, and thank you for being with us. Sergio Barragán will be the first panelist. He is the senior senior legal counsel for PepsiCo. He is also the head counsel for Global Foods. He has more than 20,000 merchant processes under him. He is the current INTA secretary. He is also the VP, the elected VP for it. Thank you very much, Sergio, for being with us. Our second panelist will be Jordi Güell. Jordi is the founding partner of Güell IT. He has 25 years of experience in intellectual property and rights around competition. He is the ECTA treasurer, and since 2019, he is also a member of the board. We have Rafael Atab. He is a partner in Animasense, and he is also the general reporter for AIPPI. He is also the AIPPI permanent member in the resolution committee and the AIPPI resolution, part of the AIPPI resolution group. We also have Maria Jimena Cobreros. She is a senior director for Procter and Gamble in the legal department. She also has more than 20 years of experience in advertising rights. Maria is the one leading or dealing with distributors throughout Latin America. She is also working directly with the Procter and Gamble business, encouraging ethical marketing, and she's very much active with all self-control organizations in the region. Thank you very much, Maria Jimena. So let us begin with our panel today, and we will start with Sergio. Thank you, Sergio. So I think I can put up the presentation. First, I would like to thank ASIPI for having me, especially Matias, who honored me by inviting me to this excellent panel of experts, and we will understand a lot around it, and moderated by my dear Anna Chris. So I am actually very happy, very pleased with this. So I think that before we start, we have to put this into context. So first, we will start with the judicial framework and authorities we have in Mexico. It is worth mentioning that this is only so we can put it into context. But when I start talking about the internal guidelines and the practices we have within Pepsico, all these guidelines are general. But the judicial framework in Mexico, we have the Code of Commerce, the Federal Protection, Consumer Protection legislation, and the Federal Industrial Property legislation. These are the three authorities through which we can see anything when it comes to ad campaign or ad company controversies. One is on the commercial side, the other one is the other two on the legal side. So if we take a look at some of the private organizations, these are the most important private organizations that I've found that go into ad company regulation. I would start with CONAR. This is an organization that focuses on self-regulation in the advertising world, and they promote an ethical ad companies. They have a code of ethics for ad companies, and they do conflict resolution between companies. CONAR is no longer operating. It exists, but it is not operating. So today we do not have this regulatory framework to solve controversies. We have these other ones, these other organizations, AMIPSI. They play a key role in self-regulation when it comes to digital media, but their main function is to promote best practices in when it comes to online ads. They have some conflict resolution component to them, and then you have the Mexican Radio and Television Organization, the same, which is the same but for traditional media, and the Mexican Association of Ad Companies, and they promote ethics within ad companies, and they have a series of other components to resolve controversies, but none of them is very effective. But this is what we have from the private side. So, one of the key concepts when it comes to comparative advertising, we can split them into three. This is a comparative chart. So they compare products and services that cannot be deceiving or abusive. And this these misleading advertisements can be abusive, and they can partialize, and they can be pretentious or ill intent. And then you have disloyal or dishonest uses of ad campaigns that attempt to cause confusion or discredit or induce errors within consumers. These are some of the key terms or key concepts when it comes to advertising agencies. Now let me just go into regulations and some of the processes that we use within PepsiCo when it comes to advertising. And we can split them into these. Some of them may overlap, but we split them. These are the guidelines, and I will elaborate on them quickly so I can share them with you. So, let us start with the do's and don'ts, and this is what we call them when it comes to advertising. All advertising information, this is important, all information we deal with has to be 100% verified. So there has to be clarity in the features and when dealing with a product. It has to be consistent, so when you put together a promotion, the promotion has to be consistent with the terms and conditions that have been presented to Profeco, and if there are any changes in the promotion, we have to register them constantly. So, these are elements that you can see on this slide. These are the most important ones when it comes to advertising campaigns. What we do a lot over at PepsiCo is do things or say what we can prove, so it will no longer be like in the past saying the best potatoes in the world unless we can actually prove that they are the best potatoes in the world. Or also, we cannot promote overconsumption. A lot of you may remember because it was a very famous slogan by Lay's and Sabritas, and we saw this in Latin America as well, that went the you cannot just eat one. We stopped using that slogan because you cannot prove that, A, and B, it is also promoting overconsumption. So all these elements have been carefully refined as time has gone by, and we've tried to be more responsible with our ad campaign. So these are the key concepts when it comes to advertising. Now, when it comes to labeling, on the right side, you will see everything that a label should have. On the left side of your screen, you will see some of the restrictions that we applied or that are applied in countries where there are regulations when it comes to labeling, such as Mexico, Chile, Argentina, and many other countries in the world, and that currently have these types of regulations. Some are a bit more stringent than in others, like the case of Latin America. Some other ones are a little bit more relaxed. You cannot use childish characters, animations, cartoons, celebrities, uh, sports athletes, mascots or pets, and nothing that can attract minors. So these are the main one for labeling. We have another document or guideline, if you will, on using influencers and celebrities, and I will not go deep into this one. You will see a little bit of what we can do, cannot do. We cannot promote stereotypes. We cannot confuse consumers when it comes to what that celebrity or influencer is doing. And the most important one, um, we we do a background check of that influencer first of all, because you have influencers. You get a lot of new influencers all the time, and we have to make sure that they are aligned with our code of conduct, ethics, and the policies of the company. And we do this very much with the corporate affairs office and communications. We call them the PR office. So the legal department, what they do is make sure that we have strong contracts with terms and conditions that are clear, so we can make sure that PepsiCo's interests are covered. The next one is ads for children, the PepsiCo Pledge. You've probably heard about this one. So the PepsiCo Pledge is a document, a self-regulation document for ad campaigns. It's internal, but made public. You can actually find it on the internet just by typing in PepsiCo Pledge. So what we try to do with this is that we have transparent commercial practices that are also ethical and responsible, and we make sure that all ads are correct, accurate, fair, and for people and competitors, and we abide strictly to the company's RSE policies. In this document, there are a series of limitations. I will focus on ad campaigns for children. Years ago, before all these regulations, when it comes to labeling and ad campaigns, PepsiCo already had a social commitment. That social commitment was to not put together ad campaigns for children under 13 years of age for some foods that would now be the ones that have seals on them, and also not use minors. This means not only not having a child under the age of 13 in our ads, but neither a person who's older than 13 but looks under 13. So they cannot look or be under 13. I will not focus on this intellectual property guideline portion because we have experts here in the room, so there is no need for me to waste your time and go into this. But the registering the trademark, not use third-party brands or anything, or trademarks, third-party images, or people, quotes from movies. It is very often where you see there's a new movie and everyone wants to quote a movie. directly or indirectly, this is something we make sure we are not doing so we cannot have any issues of unfair play. We have the Cindy Crawford uh, story where you have this from the 80s. Cindy Crawford, she's drinking a can of Pepsi. And not long ago, the business wanted to recreate a lot of some of its commercials, and they decided to recreate the scene. And when they talked to me, I asked them, "Where's the contract with Cindy Crawford?" "No, that's not Cindy Crawford. This is a model who looks like Cindy Crawford." And the answer was, "I do not care. It's not Cindy Crawford. If she looks like her, you cannot use it." We had to get rid of the commercial. So these are the little details we have to pay attention to, and they are part of the guidelines, and we have to reiterate them with customers. Now, allow me to show you quickly a specific case we dealt with in Peru. It's called the Taste Challenge, the Pepsi Taste Challenge. A lot of you probably know it. This is the Pepsi Challenge. And a campaign was put together in Peru where we had a lot of legal challenges around it and a lot of issues. We had to put together a multifunctional team so we can service or cater to each of those needs, challenges, and issues. So we put together a group with marketing, the franchise, the legal team, the communications team, the bottling company, the ad agencies. We always work that way. I'm not saying that we are not working in that way, but sometimes we put together these task forces so we can service all the needs in the business. What were the challenges we faced? Comparative ad campaigns was something we faced, and these are some of the considerations we took. The flavor, we had to compare the same products. It was very important for us to compare the product with the same features and qualities, compare the same presentations. We could not do a comparison of one can, a Pepsi can, with a plastic bottle of another drink. Milliliters, temperature, even temperature had to be the same. And the presentation for consumers. The conditions is what I am referring to. So they had to be the same conditions. Then we did the implementation and how the implementation of the challenge was put together, and then how did we identify our competitors. And I think now we go on to... So this was the invitation. So we started with the invitation to the media. We invited what we called the Pepsi naysayers, so people who said, "I'm never going to drink Pepsi." We would send them a box with products. We send it to their home so they could just take the challenge and vote directly on social media. So this entire campaign was a part of this. Let me just play a video that shows the results from the campaign. Optimistic, curious, risking everything.
68% de los que hicieron el reto Pepsi escogieron Pepsi sabor intenso. ¿Y tú, ya la probaste? ¡Atrévete!
Bueno, este es el...
So this is the ad and a summary of the campaign and the results. I'm not trying to place an ad, but these are results verified by a public notary. And as you can see, it was very respectful. We never talked about competitors. We focused on our product and what our product is offering. And so far, since 2018, no claims have been presented in Latin America where we've presented this campaign. And so I can wrap up very quickly. These are some of the guidelines that we have when it comes to event and intellectual property issues, especially in high impact events like the Olympics or the World Cup or the Oscars. It is very important. If we are not sponsors, we cannot talk about the event. So that means that we cannot post anything, do hashtags or direct references about an event. We have to move away from ambush marketing tactics. That is why we put together guidelines for it. Every time we have an event, we put together guidelines that are disseminated globally, and we say this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. If you have any questions, consult with your legal counsel department. There's something very important here, and now before I wrap up, I wanted to leave you with an ad that I love because it shows what in-house legal counsels face every single day when it comes to customer creativity. So I'll leave you with this.
The next big thing, you two, ideas.
We know that it's got to be big because it's for the Super. We can't say
You can't
Super.
say the name of the game.
You can't say Super.
Shut up.
We actually can't say Super.
No, it's trademarked.
Why can't we say?
We can get sued.
By who?
Everybody, nobody, who knows?
Wait, so can I say Super?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to say like?
Can
Can I say San Francisco?
Sure.
But I can't say the 40.
Can I say the Baltimore Raid?
Can we say the San Francisco 50 minus ones?
Love it.
Can we say the Baltimore Blackbirds?
Absolutely. All you want.
Okay.
So then what do we say instead of
The
super?
big game.
So when we
El plato supreme.
The
we're
big
doing a
plate.
commercial for the big plate featuring the San Francisco 50 minus oneers and the Baltimore Blackbirds.
You got it, Paul. You got it. I like hashtags.
Hashtags. Okay, we'll use hashtag.
Pues bueno, muchas gracias.
So right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sergio. I definitely loved your presentation. I loved the challenge. I'm wondering, what's the other brand that you were testing it up against? I wonder what that other drink was. But comparative advertising is challenging. It is not usual. This is something we do not see on TV. I think that companies are very respectful of each other in one way or another, trying to not use comparative advertising, but yours is amazing. Thank you. Now over to Jordi. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will talk about something that Sergio mentioned, ambush marketing, because ECTA next year will have a session on June 18th. We will do a legislation comparison in Latin America and Europe when it comes to industrial property. So here we are comparing this next year in the Congress in Berlin on June 28th. We will have an ASIPI ECTA on the 18th, and we'll ask you to be there. So, in Europe and in Spain, as part of Europe, the regulatory framework for advertising is based on a series of guidelines, national laws within member states, and self-regulation methods for private entities that ultimately attempt to guarantee market transparency and avoid unfair practices. And on this slide you have some of the examples, 3 directives, 3 European organizations, and they establish, or guidelines from Europe that establish a series of guidelines that have to be used with member states. And that means that in terms of ad campaigns, internal legislations of all member states within the EU have to abide by this. We force them to overlap between one another. The last one is the greenwashing one. It has a very long name. It's the greenwashing guideline. and the overlap for states, its framework is running until 2026. Then in Spain, we have the general legislation for advertising, unlawful or unfair competition legislation, and then these legislations were combined in 2007, and then the new legislation is saying now that it is considered illegal to use unfair advertising and dishonest advertising if the advertising legislation believes it to be unfair. So they overlap between one another. We have the consumer defense legislation, information society, also retailer sectorial legislations that regulate pharmaceutical products, foods, gambling advertising campaign legislations, tobacco product legislation around ad campaigns in Europe in Spain is actually pretty large. So national legislation, the European legislation, and codes of conduct for self-control, these self-regulating guidelines have a series of definitions of what dishonest advertising is and comparative advertising is. So here you have the definition. And there is a very important, the second part of it, it can alter, it is susceptible to affect the economic behavior of a consumer. So whatever information that can induce consumers, true or false, if they can alter economic behavior of consumers, so when they make their purchasing decision, if that decision was altered or changed because of dishonest information. So there are some examples in Europe, for example, in Spain especially, the R for registered when the brand is not trademarked is a new thing, but it is considered to not be susceptible to change economic behavior in consumers. When they're purchasing a product, they will decide to purchase it or not because the brand it doesn't have the copyright. When it's patented, that is susceptible to change the economic behavior because it can, the consumer may think that they are purchasing something that is protected by a patent because it may have some advanced technology or whatever. We will see some examples with the claim of saying the best. In Spain, when you say the best product, jurisprudence says, hey, consumers is used to everyone saying their product is the best product. So this is not unlawful advertisement because consumers will not listen to that. They definitely do not believe they're purchasing the best product, and it's not a non-excluding ad. So the unlawful competition legislation, the self-control, and the self-control, self-regulating legislation. So it also says that, well, there are a series of requirements that are very strict in Europe. Products and services that are compared have to be the same ones, same products. We will see an example later on. They have to be done in an objective way between a series of features that are verifiable and provable. So here, for example, when you test and say, my product tastes better than that of the competitors, or that perfume or cologne has a better scent because we've done some market research and 1,000 people pick that one because it's nicer than the other one. This is illegal competition or unfair competition in Europe because scent and taste are not verifiable. They're actually subjective features of a product that cannot be compared, therefore cannot be undermined. Comparative advertisement is allowed, but it should not be derogatory. Self-control. This is the private entity for regulation in Spain. So autocontrol .es in Spain. They have about 200 members, aside from having a code of ethics that, and this is compelled upon members before they sign up. There's a copy advice or a service. Members, before they put out an ad, even on their website, they can actually do preventive cell control queries, and then they can determine whether that ad is legal or illegal. And this is very good for highly regulated environments, so you cannot get fined afterwards. So you've run it through this check, and you'll be fine. But the reason for this presentation is conflict resolution in ad agencies and self-control. If you have a self-control process, you can abide by a lot of these resolutions. So self-control, there is a self-control court put together, or committee put together by very great experts in ad agency work. It's not a legal process. There is no legal evidence presented. You just present your documentation. The other party, they are given a very short term so they can present their information, and there is a resolution that is, or a ruling resolution that is issued in 15 days. It works fine, but in some cases it is actually better to go to courts when this is not enough, and we will go through some examples. And self-control resolutions are of due diligence for members. If you're not a self-control member, when you get a self-control resolution, you can decide to answer to it or not. Most attorneys would say do not answer, because if you answer based on the self-control regulation, you are then expressing that you are abiding by that self-control resolution. So oftentimes when you get something, given the situations, it is better to not answer. Self-control resolutions can be followed up by a motion, and if you do not agree with it, you can go to court and present a civil case, because it is not legally abiding. It doesn't go through. It's a private entity. It doesn't go through the government's court systems. I will talk a lot about comparative advertising. The first one is something that made it to the justice system. It comes from Spain, where Carrefour put out an ad campaign where they compared the prices on 500 products against Intermarché, which is a competitor. The issue is that products were compared. They compared prices in hypermarkets with prices that Intermarché had in supermarkets. So in lower tier supermarkets, so Intermarché presented a claim saying they're comparing things that are not comparable, because in a hypermarket, prices are always lower than in a retail market. And Carrefour, their prices are higher than the ones that are seen in these ad campaigns. So the Paris Appeals Court was hesitant to go into whether price comparison was legal or not, and they referred something to the Court of Justice in Europe and the EU, saying that the court was the highest level for European standard, and the Justice Court said that comparative advertising is legal, but it has to compare between equal. So whatever you're comparing is the price of a hypermarket set of products with the same set of products from another supermarket. You have to say it clearly that the prices that you compared are hypermarket prices. And here it was ruled that this was unfair advertising. That's a legislation in Europe. The law says that it is allowed, but it's very complex. Now we will put up an ad campaign by McDonald's, and you will tell us whether, based on your legislations, this is allowed or not. So here we go.
Never seen the sky so blue. The birds are singing, I got nothing to do. Hey, 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 it's just a sunny day.
keep my pay.
This is an ad from Germany, and it's not an ads. It's not comparative advertising. You're not comparing anything. You're not comparing the features of a product against another one. But here, based on the European regulation and the judicial practice, is using a foreign brand without its authorization and trying to ridicule or in a derogatory way, so it is therefore unfair advertising. I think McDonald's they made a mistake in their policies. They put out a communication complaining that Burger King was complaining that McDonald's had used their brand beyond the limits of comparative advertising, and as they were evil people and whatnot. Ultimately, what it did was it went viral. It's on YouTube. This was 10 years ago now, and you can still find it on YouTube, and it actually had the opposite effect. Everyone, tuned into the ad. The second example, this was a conflict between Procter and Gamble and Wilkinson. If Jimena allows me, Procter and Gamble won, and everything really. This is a very interesting issue because it started with self-control and it ended up in the higher court of Spain. Procter and Gamble, their brand Gillette, submitted a claim on self-control because Wilkinson was claiming they were the best for shaving skin, and Wilkinson products can shave better than Mac 3, so 1 and 3. So ad claims 1 and 3 were Wilkinson's, and there was a self-control claim submitted. So self-control in their resolution, even after there was an appeal, they said it was illegal or unfair competition because saying it's the best one and shave better without Mac 3 without saying what features they were comparing it with was unfair. Wilkinson did not agree, and they submitted a civil suit asking the court to declare it not unfair. And they added another claim saying that the cartridge that was Gillette was the best one of all times, and that additionally is illicit or unfair advertising. So 2 claims from them plus a claim directed at an ad campaign. So the good ruling, so it was from the Court of Madrid. Then the Supreme Court decided not to assess it because it was an appreciation thing and not judicial. What the Provincial Court of Madrid ended up ruling on was that claim 1 and 2 was advertising exaggerations. So consumers are already adapted to, people saying everything they have is the best. Therefore, it's not unfair competition saying their product is the best. However, the advertising message saying that it shaves better than Mac 3 without identifying what specific features make it shave better than Mac 3 was unfair, illegal advertising because Wilkinson blades slide better through the skin because they have whatever gel. It didn't say that, and just saying it shaves better was considered illegal or unfair competition. We have now then another case. This is a bit of a technical case. We had this in our firm. This proves to show how courts may not be the right way how self-control cannot be the right way to do this, because self-control, you submit your evidence, the opposite party presents their evidence, and when self-control sees 2 analyst reports, one that says it's white, the other one says it's black, then okay, it's not unfair advertising because these people are basing their claim on an actual report, and a specialist's report. This one is window signs and security windows. So there is a middle labeling that can be plastic or EVA material, and our client had more than 50% of the European market in this material, and this company put out a video saying that PVB, when it made it to 40 degrees, it would peel off. And based on this claim, there were a series of technical tests that they had conducted, but this was really unfair competition because the tester was not appropriate. Products should have gone through a series of tests to meet European standards, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to be sold in Europe. I will show you what the ad says. I will put up the ad in a moment, but the ad was saying what they were saying when they were showing different facilities, and then they were saying that the film was peeling off, the PVB film was peeling off easily, was deceitful because the test was inappropriate, because usually when layers are within the glass, you will not get a peel off.
Of a facade in summer in many countries is around 40 to 50 degrees centigrade, and PVB completely loses its adhesion. Reproducing these conditions in the laboratory reveals how the PVB completely loses its adhesion from 40 degrees upwards, whereas Evolam Visual, thanks to its high crosslink, which makes it heat stable, maintains its properties and a high adhesion. At these temperatures, PVB can even be peeled off by hand, whereas Evolam Visual maintains its adhesion.
So it was originally longer, but I just wanted to show that there was a specialist report on this. Visual was saying that effectively there is less adhesion and whatnot. If you go to self-control, you lose the claim because it's a specialist report against another specialist report. In this case, you have to go to the court with specialists that can provide their statements. They even had a specialist come in from a German institute, and they ran a report and everything. Last example, let me see which one this is. So, just like Pepsi, Coca-Cola, in Spain, there is a big battle between Don Simón and Granini. These are orange juices because Granini is always in the market saying they're natural, and it's not really, it's the nectar. And Don Simón is always saying, okay, your ad, you're saying it's natural when it's not really natural. And this is something that the Barcelona Provincial Court took in, and they said that the ad, it had a woman smelling some oranges, and she would see oranges everywhere, and there was a tree filled with oranges, and it wasn't really coming from oranges, but actually from the nectar of the orange. And when it was put together with the nectar, and the ad was saying it was natural products, but it was not directly from oranges, and that was also deemed unfair ads. I think these are a series of examples just to give you an idea, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Jordi. Most definitely times have changed. Putting out an ad nowadays is no longer the same. Just seeing something on TV is not the same, or, you cannot just stop a newspaper ad because your ad, if there's a mishap, it can go on forever. No, it can stay there forever. No. Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you very much, ASIPI, for having me. Now over to Rafael. Thank you. Congratulations on 60 years. So, If I may, I would like to talk about the Brazilian scenario for conflict resolution when it comes to ad campaigns, especially focusing on CONAR. This is our national ad agency self-regulation entity. This is the civil society or a legal organization, a non-profit, similar to what you see in the rest of the world. They were created in the 70s because the Brazilian government at the time thought about censorship on ads like they would censor other things like books, press, and others. So, stakeholders within this market got together and thought about what to do and thought, okay, let us put together some type of self-regulation attempt, so like we do in other countries, so we can get ahead of what the government will say when it comes to the rules and how we can do business. What ended up happening is that CONAR is now well respected. Their decisions are well respected, especially because CONAR and the media is sometimes seen as a takedown. Traditional media outlets will maybe have an issue with the ad if CONAR says it's deceitful or dishonest. But in practice, these are not CONAR decisions. These are actually recommendations. Like we've seen it like in the media because they are very much involved. They will put it out if CONAR says they will pull it out if CONAR says it's not appropriate. But recommendations that are coming in from CONAR are rejecting. What they can do is rejecting a claim when there's a claim on an ad being ethical or not, a warning to parties, but also correcting the ad or changing the ad, or also suspending or stopping the media outlet. But there is no need for prior consulting. Like in Spain, you cannot determine prior whether the ad is ethical or not. In CONAR, it is possible for consumers to submit a claim, and you cannot submit an anonymous claim, even though that consumer information is withheld. Parties will not know who submitted the claim, but it can be done. Competing companies can also do it, but they have to be CONAR members in order to do that. CONAR is so well respected that public organizations like the district attorney's office or consumer protecting organizations or bodies submit claims to CONAR so they can decide whether there is unfair or dishonest competition or not. So when a CONAR ruling comes out, it comes from a panel of experts. And if the parties do not move forward with the modifications or stop the ad, these authorities can take other actions that will be done by them separately. Of course, CONAR, on its own initiative, can also submit a claim to the authorities. These are some official sets of data from CONAR. They're in Portuguese, and I apologize for that, but initially, pretty much 90% of claims were submitted by CONAR. So it could prove that it was a reliable agency and respected by the market, but now the market understands and respects, and the market understands that most of the claims come from consumers and from other competing agencies, associated competing agencies or companies. What we can see here with these numbers is most of the ads have issues. There's usually something that has to be changed or modified, or something has to be stopped, or the ad has to be stopped. So now Conar's big challenge is obviously the internet. More than 80% of claims come from ad campaigns on the internet, and social media is definitely playing the main role when it comes to claims over issues with ads. By different area, you have fashion, retailers, alcoholic beverages, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. They're the ones who have the most amount of claims, as we would expect, of course. Some controversial issues here. This is an ad campaign by an internet provider, and of course, saying we are the best. Saying, of course, we are the best. There were some issues here. There was a bit of a wording trick against, similar to the other brand, the other provider, the other vendor. Just like in Spain, for Canar, saying you're the best in something is very subjective, and you're not allowed to do it because in order for you to do a comparison, you have to be objective and it has to be scientifically verifiable. You have to have an actual process, and this is important for Canar. But not long ago, there was a dispute in Canar between Unilever and Heinz because Heinz put together this ad campaign saying no one does it better than Heinz. Canar did it. They submitted it to Canar, and Canar said it's not subjective enough. But they said, well, I think that's not correct. Unilever said, I do not think that is accurate. So they've gone to court saying, yes, we can do it. It's a hyperbole. It's puffing. So the issue in Brazil is that the Supreme Court of Justice, that is has the authority, the legal authority to effectively say the interpretation of the federal law is accurate or not, and they've said if it's a message that is subjective but not deceiving consumers, if it's a portion of the market where consumers are used to something a little bit more subjective, such as foods, then that's fine. That's not an issue because it will not affect consumer perception. They will know this is just puffing, and there is nothing technical about that claim. It's not like an internet vendor or an internet provider or any other technical service where you have some techniques that can be compared. It's just a hyperbole. In those cases, what the Supreme Court of Justice determined was, okay, Unilever does it as well. With Hellmann's mayonnaise, they say the authentic mayonnaise. It's kind of the same thing. So in good faith, and under the principle that you cannot have contradicting actions, they said, okay, it's fine to do it in that sector, no issue. After that ruling, when there's a claim in Canar that has a claim about we are the best and whatever, everyone says it's just puffing. So that becomes an issue. What we're doing now is that if there's a more technical issue, it cannot be done. But if it's very, very objective, such as will people like it or not, people will like the taste or not, that's a little bit more subjective, and that's not an issue. But, of course, you can have the two in the same ad. This is an example. In Portuguese, it's in Portuguese, but the most important ad messages for this toothpaste are it gets rid of 99% of bacteria. Your breath is 3 times as fresh. And I think we've taken it too far. So good to know. Sorry.
Fresco. Mas acho que vamos longe demais. Hálito 3 vezes mais fresco.
Bueno.
Very well. It's a miracle toothpaste. And I couldn't. I thought, well, we could refer to studies, but Matias said it's not a good idea. Well, it's clear it eliminates 99%, and your breath is 3 times fresher. Are more technical matters, and for Conar, Close-Up has been able to verify, to prove that the message was based on a technical verification with studies and other technical elements that were sufficient for Conar. And of course, I believe we got a little bit too far in the buffing. Nobody will believe, I believe, that with that toothpaste you're going to be able to do other things. And of course, a new challenge that is very important for advertising is influencers. This afternoon, I believe we'll have a panel on influencers, so we'll look into that a little bit deeper. But for Conar, since there was too many cases, they created a guideline of advertising by influencers. It's like an advertising message, and they want to be spontaneous. What's in the middle of the road? Well, to be in the middle of the road, well, for Conar, the most important thing is transparency and identity of the advertising. The consumer must know that this is advertising, and for Conar, advertising will be characterized when there's, of course, an advertising for a product or service. There's payment or a commercial relationship between the brand or the company and the influencer, and even if it's not a financial relationship. And something very important as well, that there's no control or editorial control by the advertiser with respect to the topic that will be published or advertised by the influencer. Of course, in this guideline, there are some recommendations regarding the use of the tools of the platform. Instagram, for example, says, oh, that's advertising. The use of hashtags also must be very clear, so the consumer can immediately understand, comprehend that this is an advertising message. And here's an example of Vinicius Jr. that has hashtag ad, and it's in collaboration with another brand. And well, these are the Conar recommendations, at least. And here, to wrap up, there's another challenge currently, which is the use of AI in advertising. Here we have advertising by Volkswagen from last year that generated a lot of controversial debate in Brazil because they use AI to bring to life a Brazilian singer, Elis Regina, that died in 1982 at the age 36, but very well known. Somewhat polemic back in the time. She was a very strong and authentic woman. She left behind 3 offspring, a daughter, Maria Rita, who is also a famous singer in Brazil. But when her mother passed, she was, 4 years old? She barely knew her, and of course they never sang together. And that advertising what they did is that they put both of them singing together to a song that Elis Regina sang and recorded. It's called As Our Parents. It talks a little bit about generational change and how the new ones always arrive, but that sometimes we continue doing things like our parents did. The idea here is to launch the new combi. They use the same brand here in the Latin American countries, which is an electric van basically, and also to celebrate the 70 years of Volkswagen in Brazil. And they use a technology called deepfake for this ad. Let's look at it. That's Maria Rita, the daughter.
Volkswagen 70 anos. Sucesso que passa de geração em geração.
Volkswagen 70 years, event that goes from generation to generation. New is new again. Okay. Anyways, it was a very controversial ad in Brazil. Some people liked it a lot, some people not that much. Some fans of Elise said that there was disrespecting the memory of the singer, a person that was very polemic. Some people said that she would never sing for an ad for an automobile company. Also, another strong discussion was regarding the use of deepfake. Volkswagen should have warned or told the consumers that that was the technology that was being used in the ad. Well, CONAR looked into a complaint, lodged a complaint on its own, so as to discuss this a little bit more within CONAR. Regarding the use of Elis Regina in the ad, and the decision was that it was ethical. The children have authorized that, so it's okay. Also, a specificity in this case is that she was singing music that she had recorded, and at no time had she said anything regarding the product. She was just singing, the daughter and the mother. So unanimously they decided, oh, it's fair enough, good enough. Well, regarding the use of the AI tool, they decided in this case, the Attorney General's office decided in this case, nobody was going to believe that it was the actual Elis Regina singing in the ad, that everybody knew that an AI tool was used, so it was okay. However, the discussions ended up in a decision that CONAR should investigate a bit more what they're going to be doing in the future, because it could be you could have anybody saying anything regarding any product. What are we going to do when that happens? So These are new challenges we have to think a little bit about, a little bit more. But the new always comes. Thank you, obrigado, gracias. Thank you very much, Rafael. I thought that the ad was beautiful, but I think that regardless of whether it's obvious or not, the necessary disclaimers should be in place for all sorts of advertising. Thank you very much, Maria Jimena. I give you the floor. Well, thank you very much for the invitation for the first time to this event. Like Ana Cristina mentioned, her work in Procter & Gamble. I work in Procter & Gamble from Argentina, but I've been living in Panama for 13 years. Welcome here. I hope the heat didn't hit you too hard. P&G has its regional office here in Panama, so from here we have a legal department in charge of reviewing and approving all the advertising material for Latin America. So I've had the honor of dealing with all the CONARs in place in Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, El Salvador, Peru. I've been through all of them, defending and starting actions, so I have a little bit of experience in that field. I'm sorry, I'm right between you and lunch, but I'll try to make this entertaining. Well, my colleagues here have explained the whole regulatory framework, so I will not go into this. We already spoke about what does advertising mean. There could be different types of advertising, and the idea for me is to bring some examples from P&G on how we sorted out some of the cases in Latin America and in different fora. A brand is a product or service that you always have to look out for the reputation. That's what lawyers are, in-house lawyers in this case, are for. Even though I was trained in Argentina, I have to become an expert in the different countries, because obviously if you approve advertising in Brazil, it requires that I understand what are the latest updates of CONAR in Brazil, what is the background of the case, for us, it's very important for us to understand how the advertising will be judged in different countries. I mean, P&G has been around for 187 years worldwide, so it's truly a company that has sold us this one. Being a leader in advertising and doing advertising, how can we continue protecting our brands, but at the same time communicating about superior products, which is something that characterizes our company. As I mentioned before, I'm responsible for all Latin America, which implies a lot of countries and territories, the Caribbean, the islands, multiple cultures, and I believe that this is very important. Why? Because the consumer is quite different. Regardless, if we all here start asking ourselves here some questions, we'll see that there's a lot of differences in terms of mass consumption products, shampoo, a diaper, toothpaste, sanitary pad, medication. There's such a variation that we have to understand the specificity of each one of the consumers so we can talk directly to them. But obviously as well, in this age, we have to be simpler, not rework things. We have to look for that ad that allows us to have a regional message that's the same for all the countries, and then amplify or make it customize, make it more local to just the local consumers. So in this world of diverse cultures throughout the region, for us it is a challenge, because imagine that in Argentina the water is different from Mexico, or the water is harder. How do you carry the studies? How do you make those advertising relations that are true in each one of the countries? We have a whole technical team that has to understand the differences of how a product behaves in one place versus the other. Why, for example, a toothpaste in the case of Brazil is the country where people brushes their teeth most per day, and that's true. Why the babies, when we carry out studies with consumers, whereas the test, and the babies in Argentina are the ones that pee the most. That's something you learn when you start playing the role. We believe we're all the same, but no. Chile is the market that uses less hair conditioner. When I came to Panama, I thought, well, this is a place where highest humidity. We should test products here for hair frizz. The specificities, as an in-house lawyer, you have to go into details, because afterwards what happens? The claim, the ad claim has a support, and the support is valid perhaps for Argentina, but not for Mexico. So you have to understand in detail the specificities and differences in order to be able to have the certainty that if you have to defend, and if the case may be, you have all the information. Obviously, as my colleague explained here, we in the company, we have advertising code of ethics, we have processes, we have guidelines that must be followed by our clients. The clients for sales and marketing, as well as the development clients, who are the ones that do the testing of the products, of the formulas. People in marketing, the consumer studies people, we have a lot of guidelines that they have to follow, because once the ad is out there, it has to be perfect, so that if you have to file in some requirement or authority asks, how did you support this? I have to have everything ready. I cannot start an action and start there. No, ethics state that you have to tell the truth, and the consumer at the end of the day is the one who is receiving the information, and we have to fulfill the promise we're making. In Latin America, in this cultural diversity, we also have authority diversity. What does this mean? That we have private authorities. We were talking about different CONARs. We have public and there's differences between countries. We have many bodies in the Ministry of Health that also are involved in the advertising, and there's a trend. I believe it also depends on the political agenda of each country, of the government in the country, that go into these topics that are very interesting, and regulate, be more restrict. I mean, P&G is a company that globally always supported self-regulation. In other words, we try to belong to the self-regulation mechanisms, collaborate with them, participate in fora and meetings, work with the chambers, the advertising chambers, to look at new inputs and new standards and guidelines. I believe that all companies should have this ethical profile that allows us to compare to each other, that allows us to put out communications. They could be aggressive, yes, sometimes you want to be aggressive in order to be able to show and communicate how your product is superior, but always within certain parameters, and that's why it's important. I believe this trend of continuing with self-regulation, although we see what is happening currently, that there's many countries or many authorities that don't have so much practice, but definitely it is a safer road for us, and not to be at the mercy of public policies that are a bit more rigorous than compared to what that they will be practical for us in the company. When we talk about comparative advertising specifically, I mentioned this, saying the truth, telling the truth. What does it mean? That we have all the data. For us internally, what can data be? That the statement could be technical. We have advertising that could be about product performance, to also have all the information, like I said beforehand. We have statements regarding preference, that the consumer selects you, they choose you. What is the percentage? So you have a reliability on that survey. What is the basis you have? Did you ask 20 people? Is that valid to say that you're you're preferred in such country? Well, what does that country look like? I mean, what cities should be subject to the survey? I mean, you have to go into the details, because otherwise you might have a surprise that somebody did something believing that they were covering, but that's not the case. So how do you go into that level of detail? I mean, how do we organize a survey, for example? Then you have claims that could be number one. I mean, data that has to do with sales, be the best sales. Doesn't mean you're the preferred, because you could be the most sold, but people would like to buy another one, but they cannot buy it. So it's not the same thing. So there are certain things that for people that work in advertising and people in marketing, they say, no, it's the same. No, being number one does not mean that you're the most sold or the better. So we have to go into the subtlety of the messages and what will be the interpretation of the consumer and the authorities. So our duty as lawyers, in-house lawyers, is to oversee both. What will the consumer interpret and what will the authority interpret, and also work on the many messages that the authority may interpret, because there's not a single authority. Most of the agencies or CONADES are scholarly groups, and you know that there's people that are experts. You have members in most of them, not in all of them, but in most of them, like in Brazil, you have a scholarly body where you have people from the advertising world and people from the ad agencies, where you have lawyers, where there are technical people, where you have people from the media. So each one of them has a certain expertise on a specific topic, and it's very rich to have a variety, because otherwise we stay at the very technical level or something that's very subjective, and sometimes depending on the case you require one or the other or a combination of both. So it's very important this scholarly agencies, people that have a different background that will allow us to enrich in the discussion, right? Because obviously the cases end up being very subjective depending on who sees it, how they see it, and with what lens you're carrying out the analysis. Well, to talk about comparative advertising, I brought an example that I'll display, I believe, because we have very little time left, of an ad that was made by P&G. If you want, we can show the video. We put two teeth-like forms, and we dipped it in different toothpaste, and we see how they act in different hard-to-reach places. Difference in deep cleaning. Well, I'm sorry if stop there. It doesn't matter. Well, anyways, this claim, this case, it's a launch. I had another ad from Chile, but sometimes what happens internally is that people you have new people coming in for marketing, and they say, I'm an American company, I want to do comparative advertising like in the US. So the answer is, no, you can't do it, it's illegal. No. Is it forbidden? No. Why can't I? Well, it is forbidden in Salvador and Guatemala. You could do comparative advertising in the other countries. However, the reality is that people do not do comparative advertising. Why not? Because obviously we go into this whole issue to say that one wins and the other loses in any of the attributes, generates what we all try to uphold or attack as demeaning. Comparing is always demeaning. The answer is no. You can compare objectively to inform the consumer what your product has that the other one perhaps doesn't have, for which you would like them to consider tomorrow to buy your product. The reality that for us this was the first launch of explicit comparative advertising, but it's changed because this commercial underwent a lot of modifications. This in Brazil, Colombia, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Venezuela, and we got letters from Bolivia, Dominican Republic, and Ecuador that were complaining. In this, it was strategic. It was the same day. The situation was very complicated. The general manager wanted to be very explicit because obviously we were not the market leaders. So he wanted to be very aggressive in his advertising, and you try to explain to him what could happen and be prepared for what could happen. So this ad, obviously we didn't lose it, but it did undergo a lot of modifications. My concept of winning or losing is to keep it out there. We had to modify it and make changes, and then we had completely red versions and completely white versions, and we've all done also the testing. How do you carry out the studies? We talked about these industry standards. In mass consumption, at least in Latin America, there are no standards. I mean, if tomorrow I go and define a demonstration of how much a diaper absorbs versus another product, or this, a toothpaste that has a new ingredient that does not exist, then what are the comparative standards? The truth is that they end up being the testing of a company versus the testing of another company. So the authority, and that's logical, the authority says, well, they brought something else. It seems that it's okay, so how can you solve this type of things? Is something where in Latin America we haven't made much progress in those standards, so sometimes it's obviously try to look for the best way. My advice to the customers is always, if you're going to put out an ad with a competitive claim that's very aggressive versus the competition, it seems important that you have third-party data. Why? Because you can give the authority an additional tool to say, okay, A says something, B says something else, but it's validated by a third party who's impartial that checked the studies. But it's very difficult actually because there are no standards. So when we talk about who's doing better or what cleans better and what is better for your hair, each company ethically makes their best efforts because to make their studies be objective, that represent the consumer, that represent the habits of use of a product, because it's very important to determine how the product is used in real life. To say that a diaper absorbs more than another, if I put a bottle of water or a half a liter jar of water, it's not the same. Or in my case, well, it's okay, it absorbs very well, great. But then what is the use of the diaper? How do babies use the diaper? The baby moves. It's not that it absorbs so much liquid. So those things are important always. Sometimes we ask, okay, I like your technical testing, but what is the testing with the consumers? What did the consumer think about your product? Is it truly aligned with what you're saying, that what you're promising, or not? Well, these are some of the photographs of how the case evolved. I'm here to talk about the comparisons you can compare against yourself, like the softest diaper, the softer protection from Pampers. Then you have the best diaper of history. That's an example of the best. That case, there was a complaint towards a competitor, and the competitor has to clarify because there was a very tiny disclaimer that said by them. But obviously, the authority said that if you put it in the disclaimer, not as part of the claim, was confusing and misleading for the consumer. So if I'm going to say that the product is the best of my line, it has to be clearly expressed in the main claim and not with an asterisk down there. The asterisk is very used. Several different the way different authorities see it, but this case. Then another in Pampers in comparison, you can compare it against one against more than one or the whole market. And the case of Downy is our product. And this case, we filed a claim versus the other company in Brazil, and we lost that in Brazil because we wanted to argue that there was a confusion, although nobody can own that tone of blue color, or nobody can be the owner of the orange flower. For us, the combination of elements in the shelf does generate confusion. This product, the competitor launched it first in Brazil. We didn't win this in Brazil, but then they launched it in Chile. But so in Chile, the CONAR in Chile is very swift. I must say it's the quickest one in Latin America, solving controversies. In Chile, we were able to prove the confusion among the consumers with these two products. If we put them side by side on the shelf, and that was basically the intention. So we were able to get that changed in Chile, as the sourcing of the competitor was not from Chile, but rather from Brazil. They had to change the label for all Latin America due to the confusion that was generated versus our product. And that for us, it also gave us a little bit of a working regionally allows us to have that sensitivity of knowing what authorities are more convenient to go to first. So why go to one CONAR versus the other? What is the speed? How they solve versus the other? So if you have regional campaigns, or even in this case, know what is the origin of the product, a resolution can help in one country, and definitely that will generate a collateral effect that will help you in the rest. So this being a regional group allows us to have all that learning and that experience that obviously at the time of making decisions, you have to pick your battles. We always tell marketing, I mean, we're not here to start fighting for whatever, and we have to decide on those things that truly have an impact, because it's not, the idea is not, I mean, that's not our job. Our work is to ensure that the P&G advertising goes out right. That's our work. If there are some things that you have to make the decision to file a complaint, to have that experience helps us to make the right decisions when we file our claims. This is a case of ambush marketing regarding the workout for 2014. This is a case that was solved in the Argentinian authority. As you can see, you believe that ALA is the official sponsor of the Argentinian football team. You can see the ALA product with Argentina T-shirt, and Ariel was the official sponsor of the Argentinian football club at that time. Our competitor launched a campaign using the word sponsor and the Argentinian T-shirt, and a player that for many years has been in the Argentina's selection. He was not there at that time though, but well, Procter, AFA, Santa Monica, those who have the rights over Argentinian Amateur Football Association, filed a complaint before just the defending rights, because obviously it was also important for them to also credit that one as a sponsor pays a certain amount to be able to have that exclusivity using the symbols linked to AFA. There was a legal action in Argentina. We lost them the first time around. The second time around, they gave us a cautionary measure, and they had to remove the ad from from the media. So there was a case of ambush marketing that I understand in Argentina. This is a case study for the university thanks to this action. Something similar happened in Colombia that we also had the Colombian Federation. In this case, the authority that was picked because it also works very well and it's very swift. The superintendents, where they defend the consumers from these type of practices. Here we have a practice that was the competition was carrying out in the shelves. I mean, with they even had the demo ladies with official T-shirts. So, well, this was an action that we carried out in Colombia as well. As you can see as well, one also has to support their marketing team that when they make an investment, they truly defend that investment. So it's very important to be there, aligned, and working fast, because here what we also need is a quick action, because otherwise, well, the damage will be already done. And in this digital era, it's very easy for time to go by and nothing happens. Here's a case of when we did an ad. Well, I'm telling you, we don't sponsor anything, no federation, and we don't sponsor the World Cup. So for you to see a case of advertising talking about football when we were at the time of the World Cup.
Cuando hay fútbol en tu cabeza, Head and Shoulders te deja hasta 100% libre de caspa. Para que le grites al mundo el amor por tu país. Lleva el orgullo de tu país en la cabeza. Head and Shoulders.
Well, this was a case that we worked thoroughly with the people from marketing because, like as you mentioned, every time we have the workup, we have to carry out all the whole guideline of everything that is trademarked and that you cannot use, what drawings you cannot use, so that people already know where they cannot go. In this case, we were not sponsors, and we worked a lot with marketing to see what we could do. And the guideline is always you can talk about football during the workup if and only if what you're saying, you could say it at any time. This means this advertising is valid during the World Cup, is valid today, because definitely you're talking about the passion that you have for your country. That's something that is always valid. So for me, it's always the guideline is that if you can use it today and you can use it tomorrow, when there's no World Cup, it's okay. If the link is indirect with the World Cup, it's wrong. So this is an example of how to work with marketing beforehand so as not to infringe any trademark. We had no complaints, so that was there. And lastly, I brought some examples of opportunity marketing. That is something that is requested by our customers a lot, and is how to react instantaneously regarding things that are happening. You know, the Barbie film. Well, here they wanted to be very creative at that time, and it just came out, so I have to post now. This is coming down, let's go party, that's our product, and also the people from Colgate hopped on to the pink trend, so this is what's happening. It requires obviously 24/7 assistance because they send you the message and you answer right away, but well, that's part of the immediacy of the work that you have to work with marketing all the time. Some exaggerations that we also talked about, that people will not believe it. Your hair is stronger than the sun. In all the Old Spice campaigns that are extremely exaggerated. And for us, always the most important thing is to meet our promise. We promise to the consumers whose lives we always try to improve. That's a Procter logo, how to improve our consumers' lives. The difficult part for an innovative company that always looks for things that do not exist to improve that life is how do we do with the comparisons. You have to compare pears versus pears and apples versus pears. Apples. Procter invented the disposable diaper versus the cloth diaper. How do I do comparative advertising? How do I show my innovation if we create things that did not exist before? That's a challenge, because I cannot compare with technologies that are not out there. We try to convince and influence the authorities that sometimes it's truly difficult when you're a pioneer in innovation. So we have to I have to compare myself with what's out there. So how do I do it? So how do I do that so it's not considered demeaning if there's nothing out there? I invented something new. How to work with that? How do I make the consumer know something that does not exist today? I mean, the detergent pods. I mean, that's this a new pod. It doesn't exist. I have to compare myself to what out there with the trends and the customs out there. This is the last video.
At Procter & Gamble, we start each and every day by asking the question, what if? As in, what if we could figure out an easier solution to one of life's big problems? Or a better solution? Or a more convenient, more sustainable, more innovative solution? For over 175 years, we've asked, what if? Because the only way to find the answer is to start by asking the question. For example, what if getting your clothes clean could be easier, and easier, and easier, and easier, and even easier? What if we could somehow make this, and this, and this, smell like this, and this? What if we made a diaper that could hold a gallon of baby food? As in a full gallon of baby food. That could come in handy. What dish detergent could save lives? Cute, precious, cuddly lives. What if we could make an eraser that was magic? As in literally magic. What if we applied what we know about cleaning dishes, hands, and clothes? Helping clean the world's drinking water? What if we focused on solving more of the little problems? So people could focus on solving more of the bigger problems. And what if after almost 2 centuries of asking that same simple question, we were still super obsessed with discovering new and interesting answers? Because what if your skin could be reprogrammed to act younger? Or what if detergent could reshape your clothes? Or what if hair never changed with the weather? Or what if stains never actually stained? Or what if dishes clean themselves? Or, well, you get the idea. P&G.
Well, if you have questions, ask your lawyer. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Jimena. You really were very eye-opening with your presentation. I think all of you, are, us as lawyers for brands and patents, we're somehow linked with advertising, but definitely we're not experts. So today, all four of you really illustrated us in an impeccable manner. So thank you very much for this. Do we have time for questions? No? Okay. Yes? Okay. We'll give the floor to the audience for maybe 2 questions, if there's any questions out there. Well, I do have a question. What was your experience, advantages and disadvantages when you deal with the different agencies in Latin America? As I mentioned already, I think the important thing is speed. I believe that immediacy in the solution of controversies is important. Second, to have agencies that would allow us to have clear rules. Although there's a subjective factor because the reality of the interpretation of advertising, we have subjectivity. It has to be clear rules of the game, and you should have a higher instance for appeals. That it doesn't depend on a single person. There's a scholarly group or scholarly body that are constantly looking for evolution, looking into new topics, AI, influencers, to provide clear guidance to the companies. I think that's the most important thing. Okay, thank you very much. So, well, hello. Hello. Yes, we can hear you. Can you heard me? Yes. Hello, good morning everybody. I would like to congratulate you for the presentation. It's been quite originating. I've learned a lot, and I believe that is the advantage that ASIPI has for all of us. And I wanted to ask you, how do you see the trends in advertising? Are we looking more into Europe in terms of regulations, or are we looking more towards the US, which is a little bit more relaxed in advertising? Thank you. the way I see it, I believe that we're being more strict. I don't know what you believe, but we're becoming more and more strict. Well, we'll hear how it is in Europe, but the experience I have with my company in the region that I work on and elsewhere in the world in advertising is becoming more strict because the authorities becoming more strict in the way they judge and analyze campaigns, but I don't know what the rest of the colleagues think. In Europe, also looking at the last video, what's coming down the line now is the fight against eco washing, the sustainable, recyclable, good for the environment, the things that these companies like so much, that will be cut off. It will be strongly controlled. You will need some special rubber stamps to be able to say it's sustainable. You cannot say that you have a sustainable product if what is sustainable is only the packaging. I think that what's coming down at least in Europe, is a very strict control of all the eco widening topic. The comparative advertising is legal, but it's highly controlled, and in fact, it's not customary in Europe to have comparative advertising, and actually, what I believe is coming afterwards, there will be the screen washing topic. Is the topic of AI, the compulsory informing of the use of AI in different environments. I don't know, Latin America, if you're going to go look more into the US or Europe, but in Europe it's quite strict, the whole advertising topic right now. And if I can add something, I believe in Latin America we have to be very cautious regarding the green directives of Europe, because I think they're coming over here. There are prohibitions due to the sustainable claims, and also the impact for the brands, because if the brand comes up with something that can sound like a claim for the brand, it could be a problem in the future in Europe and perhaps also in Latin America. Well, definitely I believe that the sustainability topic is a topic that's coming down the road. It seems to me that sometimes, well, you have to strike a balance, because we're not that sophisticated or as technical as in Europe. For authorities, at least the private agencies can carry out interpretations and reviews of topics that are so technical, so I believe that we have to strike a balance. And it's great when the guidelines come out, because it's also complicated. I mean, it's not so easy, and if we're going to get so restrictive and then we're going to be judging, I mean, the companies without having being so knowledgeable about the topic will be difficult. So I believe that we have to strike a balance between the US and Europe, because many of the companies as well, the global companies as well, tend to have their own guidelines that always look for a midpoint, and the company sometimes decides not to do some things to comply with European or US requirements. A lot of the problems will be with a lot of local players who are not part of the agencies. I mean, they have another type of responsibility or enforcement possibility of many things that will be more complex and also very difficult there, because you comply even though there's some law. You don't say that even if it's not forbidden, but at the end of the day your local competitors do it. So you have to strike a balance, but I do believe that where the trend is heading is to everything that's digital, AI and sustainability, definitely. A question, please. First, congratulations for a great presentation. I wanted to know what is the experience of Jimena, for example, that she's worked with several canals in Latin America. Normally, when you start a proceeding of a company versus the ad from another company, for example, when CONAR gets to a recommendation decision, the companies usually they say, oh, I abide by the CONAR from another country because I'm from Brazil, for example. Do they abide by the decision, or they go to trial to debate this? Because these These are advertising self-regulation concepts, and our recommendation is not a decision regarding competencies, how this work in other countries. In the case of Brazil, the Brazil CONAR is the only one that generates an enforcement. Why? Because the media are part of it. So if you have a resolution that says that your ad does not follow the code of ethics, the media automatically will take it down, even if the company doesn't like it. Doesn't happen in any other CONAR in any other country in Latin America. So there has to be the will of the parties that have that they adhere to the code of ethics, and CONAR will have the moral obligation of taking the recommendations made, either take down advertising or make changes. It's happened to me internally that a general manager said, I don't want to follow the resolution from CONAR. I said, perfect. If you don't want to abide by it, you have to call the chief compliance officer of the company that's in favor of self-regulation and say that you don't want to follow the recommendation. In that case, he said to me, okay, then I'll have to follow it, because it's difficult internally to say, but we do abide. But if it truly we do not agree, well, the rules of the games, that's the way they are. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Sometimes we win things that not necessarily, we had so much competition to win, sometimes the other way around. So the reality is that here we have to be, it's a decision of the company to promote self-regulation, so we have to be there. But once again, well, for me, it's also important there, the whole issue that self-regulation and agencies have to have certain objectiveness, clear processes, because there is no legal certainty. I, as a company, I also decide not to participate. So that possibility is out there, but yes, CONAR Brazil is the only one that enforcement is automatic. It doesn't happen with the rest of them. Okay. Thank you, everybody, very much for your presence. And thank you, Rafael, Maria Jimena, Sergio, and Jordi for being here with us today. Thank you.